Stoicism, a philosophical school of thought that traces its origins to antiquity, and since then it has gone through a few phases of popular resurgence. The most recent resurgence evidently occurring in contemporary society, and indeed, one doesn't have to look far for Stoic content. Entire YouTube channels, blogs, podcasts, social media pages, and books are dedicated to Stoicism. With that said, what does it mean to be Stoic? Is a Stoic emotionless and always presenting a neutral expression? Additionally, once we extract a general idea of what Stoicism entails, the next question would be, is Stoicism valid? Phrased differently, is Stoicism's teachings practically beneficial and worthy of serious consideration? Or is it just another philosophy that's nothing special, a dime a dozen? Today's discussion will briefly explore Stoicism by evaluating its fundamental assertions and attempt to determine if the philosophy has any merit from a practical standpoint. I'll perform this objective by outlining central Stoic beliefs from Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, the primary source material for today's discussion. Next, I'll explain the implications of accepting these fundamental Stoic beliefs and assertions. Finally, I'll consider their merits and note some reservations that detract from Stoicism's validity as a practically beneficial philosophy, at least from my perspective. To begin, instead of quoting passages verbatim like I typically do, I'll paraphrase and post particular references in the description. This way, I can avoid prolonging the discussion unnecessarily. I understand that your time is valuable, so thank you for taking the time to watch. I truly appreciate it. Regarding the universe, Aurelius claims that its events either occur randomly or they're guided by divine providence. He takes the latter view and asserts that the universe is governed by providential reason with objective laws created by God that explain the function of everything. Building off this view, Aurelius claims that nothing is accidental because every action is performed in an intentional and precise manner, evidently dictated by this providential reason. The natural conclusion from the above assertions is that everything follows a predetermined path, a sequential cause and effect chain. We tend to classify this phenomenon as fate or destiny, and thus, there's no alternative since every outcome was meant to occur from the very beginning. Even though this is accepted as true, the universe is also cyclical because many themes are recycled across time, just like its matter. Furthermore, change is inevitable and a fundamental component of the universal order. Essentially, the only constant, besides external events following a fixed path, is change. Finally, Aurelius claims that the universe and its reasonable nature is inherently good because its operations are orchestrated by God, who is also good and perfect. Regarding what's actually good and the ultimate good, Aurelius asserts, like other Stoics, that since the universe is governed by providential reason, the ultimate good is acting in accordance with this nature. Truth, justice, and virtue, for example, are principles that align with this universal nature, and the world we occupy can be likened to a large city where acting in the interest of the broader community is paramount. For Aurelius, doing good at a personal level necessitates practicing justice, obeying God, and submitting to His will by accepting or resigning yourself to everything. The events that happen are good because they've been masterfully planned by a benevolent God. Doing good also means that you must refrain from acting unjustly or malevolently to others. Harming another person is contrary to the interests of the universal city, and this is, therefore, contrary to the reasonable nature that governs everything. The last comment on the good is that many things we classify as good aren't actually good. They only derive this status from the subjective perceptions and feelings we assign to them. Fame, fortune, and glory, for example, is all vanity, not worthy of consideration and therefore not true goods. Now then, with the good outlined, what about evil? True evil, according to Aurelius, is doing anything that's contrary to nature and its providential reason. Evil, or in the very least, ignorant actions would include not being virtuous, committing injustice, lying, not accepting/obeying the fate that has been assigned to you, inflicting harm upon others, giving in to passions such as anger, not acting benevolently towards others and criticizing out of spite. Evil is also claimed to be performed out of ignorance regarding the good, or ignorance regarding the universe's reasonable nature. If one is enlightened, or made aware of the proper way one should act, then evil will theoretically cease. Regarding death, Aurelius claims that fearing death is unjustified since it's a natural and inevitable function of the universe, which once again is inherently good. Furthermore, we're mistaken to classify death as evil, and it doesn't matter when we die since our time of death was dictated from the very beginning. For Aurelius and other Stoics, it's fundamentally not how long we live, but rather what we do with the time that we're afforded. Speaking of time, he asserts that we should focus entirely on the present because it's the only verifiable reference point. The past no longer exists and the future is yet to exist. Knowing this, the present is really the only period to actually exist as far as we can tell. Therefore, we should focus solely on the present and cease worrying about the past and the future, while also keeping in mind that the future isn't guaranteed. In other words, Aurelius is advising that you should live with intention, like every day will be your last. On free will, he claims that despite destiny being set in stone, we still possess a rational free will. We're free to choose how to respond to events. Therefore, we can either choose to act reasonably by gracefully accepting all that happens to us, or we can act in an irrational/unreasonable manner by succumbing to passions and rebelling against the reasonable universal order. Last topic for the outline: personal conduct. Aurelius claims that emotions, or passions, are irrational and contrary to the inherently good, or right, reason that guides the universe. While we may experience emotions, we must avoid succumbing to them because the actions they elicit are impulsive and irrational. Thus, to follow right reason, we must avoid consenting to passions. Instead, we're to remain indifferent and immune to them. Aurelius advocates for an extremely precise moderation of emotions and urges because they can detrimentally influence our thoughts and actions, if not hijack them completely. As mentioned previously, he asserts that we should ultimately aim to be virtuous and tailor our actions to nature and its providential reason. Everyone possesses this capability, reason, but not everyone has knowledge of this true good, nor do they adhere to it. In response to the opinions of others, Aurelius notes that regardless of how they perceive us, we should be unaffected by their opinions. Furthermore, we shouldn't seek praise from others because it's fleeting and vainglorious, nor should we become sorrowful due to criticisms because they're just as vain. Avoiding injustice, the very thought of injustice, and acting benevolently to everyone are some of the other actions Aurelius advocates for. Finally, we should only speak the truth and act with precision by never saying or doing anything unnecessarily. Indeed, precision is the name of the Stoic game, not just precision for its own sake, but precision that aligns with the providential reason of an inherently good universe. With the fundamental assertions outlined, on to the analysis. As I read through the Meditations, it took a while to grasp the multitude of ideas and their interconnectivity. I was perplexed, but also fascinated, and gradual understanding began to emerge with continued rumination and rereading of passages. Anyhow, with the fundamental assertions outlined, we're bound to ask, why does this matter? If Marcus Aurelius's claims regarding the universe are true, then what are the implications? The first implication is that we can no longer ask these questions. What if things were different? Would circumstances be different if I made better decisions? For Aurelius, this line of questioning is erroneous because events are determined to follow an unalterable course. You may ask, but doesn't this eliminate free will, since my decisions/responses could also be classified as predetermined? Aurelius responds to this concern by asserting that external events, or events beyond our control and influence, have been predetermined. Although we can't control external events, we can control our reaction/response to these events through the exercise of free will, which is separate from the fixed course of events due to our capacity for reason. Second implication, Since we're at the mercy of destiny, it's useless and detrimental to resist the current along the river of life. Resisting the current causes more harm than good, both to yourself and others, because you're acting against the universe and its governing reason, which is inherently good. Third implication: many of the circumstances we classify as evil, or worthy of fear and condemnation, aren't actually evil. Instead, we're to be indifferent to these events. For Aurelius, true evil is acting contrary to nature and its inherently good reason. Committing evil, or actually being classified as evil, occurs when one commits injustice against another, abandons virtue and succumbs to anger, for example. Meanwhile, death, sickness, and failure, for example, isn't evil. We simply classify these states as such through our faulty perceptions, and if we act in accordance with universal reason, then we won't even think to classify them as evil. Fourth implication: emotions are irrational and animalistic, thus we must avoid succumbing to them. The Stoic may experience these emotions initially, but he'll be immune to their effects. How so? He's immune because he doesn't allow passions to influence his conduct. Instead, he'll be guided solely by reason, and he only consents to actions that align with reason. Although he may feel anger, for example, he'll refuse to validate this emotion internally, and thus, no visible external reaction will result due to his refusal to permit actions dictated by emotion, anger in this case. Careful consideration of everything through precision in thought and action is paramount for the Stoic. Fifth implication: we're to act benevolently to everyone, even enemies and people who are harsh to us. Additionally, becoming angry with anyone or leveling malicious criticism is irrational and unjustified. Fundamentally, the Stoic must correct without malice, avoid criticizing anyone, and always align their thoughts and actions with virtue, justice, and reason. If you adhere to Stoicism, then your emotional regulation capabilities will theoretically improve. Furthermore, you'll be more likely to express gratitude no matter the circumstance, and you'll have less concern regarding the past and future. Stoicism is beneficial in the sense that it challenges us to reconsider what we classify as important, good, or valuable, in addition to how we perceive ourselves, the external world, and its events. An old adage remarks, "Life is 10% of what happens to us, and the other 90% is how we respond." Indeed, and the Stoics would agree with this expression because they explicitly remark that we suffer more from our reactions compared to the actual events themselves. Another benefit, if you adhere to Stoicism, would be augmented precision in thought and action. You won't do anything unnecessarily because you'll only speak and act with maximum efficiency. From a productivity standpoint, this is obviously beneficial since we'd rather not waste our finite time and effort, especially in this modern era where distractions are ostensibly everywhere. Finally, if you adhere to Stoicism's ethical tenets, then you'll, theoretically, be immensely patient with others, a better listener, and act with compassion towards everyone. This list isn't exhaustive, but these are some of the principal benefits I can foresee. With that said, on to the reservations I have regarding Stoicism. One significant reservation pertains to the Stoic claim that every external event, or everything outside of ourselves, follows a predetermined sequential chain, what is typically called fate or destiny. I find it difficult to reconcile the claim that external events are entirely predetermined with the assertion that our capacity for free will remains unaffected by this very same destiny. If there's no alternative outcome since every external event follows a particular script, then wouldn't this imply that my thoughts and actions are also bound to this script? How can we say for certain that the free will we possess is entirely unaffected by the universe's providential destiny? In my mind, I find it difficult to believe that our capacity for free will would be completely unaffected if it's true that everything follows a predetermined script. It's certainly within the realm of possibility that our thoughts and actions could actually be the natural progression of a sequential cause and effect chain, rather than occurring spontaneously as we believe. In this case, we believe we're exercising our free will, but this is just an illusion. Quite concerning indeed, because then we actually don't have control over anything, not even our thoughts, reactions, and actions. If true, this would deal a fatal blow to Stoicism's fundamental assertions. The second reservation involves the classification of emotions, or passions, as detrimental, and that they should be avoided if not suppressed entirely. I concur with the claim that emotions must be regulated so we don't fully succumb to them. Control your emotions or they'll control you, as the saying goes. But I'm reluctant to agree that you shouldn't experience any emotions, or you should endeavor to ignore/suppress this capacity by essentially becoming numb to any emotion. We're not robots, and our emotions are a significant part of what makes us human. Despite carrying negative connotations from certain perspectives, emotions serve a positive purpose by inspiring constructive action, producing empathy, and signaling to others how we're truly feeling in response to their decisions. Let's face it, no matter how much we try to bottle up or hide our emotions, they're going to come out eventually. Pretending that we're immune to them and/or that they have no constructive purpose is a delusion, one that can be fatal if it pushes us beyond our ability to effectively cope with life's hardships. Proper emotional regulation is understood as keeping emotions on a leash, so to speak, because while we can't fully suppress them, we can effectively limit their tendency to drive irrational behavior through conscious resistance. Pretending that emotions don't exist isn't effective regulation, nor is it conducive to the principle of rational problem solving. My third reservation involves the claim of evil acts being committed out of ignorance. Aurelius claims that evil acts are committed out of ignorance, or unconsciously rather than deliberately, and if individuals were more enlightened through an understanding of true reason, then evil acts would cease. From my perspective, this is simply untrue, idealistic, and flawed. Why? Because many people commit evil acts willingly and with complete awareness of the consequences. They aren't ignorant or unenlightened to the harms that they inflict on others because they know exactly what they're doing, and they simply don't care. A counterpoint could be that they don't understand down to the minute details regarding the harms they inflict, but my rebuttal is that general understandings are sufficient enough. For example, when a country's political leaders decide to wage war against another country, they're evidently aware of what war fundamentally entails, namely, death, misery, and destruction on a widespread scale. Even though they'll never understand or be enlightened to how their decisions negatively impact every single person affected, they're still enlightened enough to realize that their actions are evil/unjust, but they ignore this understanding for other reasons such as desire for power, greed, etc. My point is that being enlightened to the consequences of evil isn't sufficient to actually prevent evil. Something else is required, and that something originates within our capacity for compassion, an inherently emotional response. This could be a separate reservation, but I'll keep it under this one because of their interconnectivity. Deciding to perform just actions and avoid evil, for many people, doesn't stem from rational thinking alone. In actuality, it's their compassion for the suffering of others that drives them to do good. For example, my reason may inform me that it's just to treat others with respect, but what actually compels me to respect others is my ability to feel compassion, the ability to see myself in others, to empathize with their suffering by recalling how I felt when I experienced similar injustice, is actually what motivates me to do good and avoid evil. Compassion is required for benevolent conduct, and those who lack compassion for other people tend to have no problem acting malevolently, even if they possess the capacity for reason and they're fully enlightened to the nature of their actions. To conclude, is Stoicism practically useful and worthy of consideration? This philosophy is certainly worthy of consideration given its endurance and influence since antiquity, but the question of utility depends on you. Knowledge is only practically useful if you, by definition, apply such knowledge in practice. To be fully Stoic, you'd have to accept the validity of its worldview along with the claims which stem from it. Nevertheless, if you have questions and reservations like I do, this doesn't preclude you from extracting valuable insights. Stoicism fundamentally challenges us to question whether the things we perceive as valuable are actually deserving of consideration. Is fame, fortune, and glory actually good, or is it all vanity? Additionally, are the opinions of others truly important, or will they eventually fade away just like everything else? We can benefit from Stoicism's advice regarding precision in thought and action, because with finite time we can't afford to waste it. Furthermore, precision in emotional regulation and not succumbing to every passion that grips us is another recommendation we should consider. We do, indeed, suffer more in imagination than reality, as Seneca once remarked. And this is true when we realize that our thoughts of any event can influence our external response. In the case of perceivably negative events, they'll continue to inflict harm upon us if we fixate our thoughts upon them. Lastly, if we have free will, then we should aspire to control what we can control, which is our reaction to everything that happens to us. The best piece of advice from Stoicism, in my mind, is to remain even-keeled no matter what. Avoid flying too high when you succeed, but also don't drown in the depths of despair when you fail. Perhaps it's not delusional to keep uttering to yourself, "I'll be fine," because as long as you maintain the right frame of mind, or perspective, then you truly will be fine no matter what befalls you. Thank you for taking the time to watch. If you enjoyed today's video, please consider subscribing.